All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, welcome to Fate's Wide Wheel. I'm Sam.
I'm Dennis.
We're
Sam,
here
how you
this
doing?
week. Oh, I'm good. I'm a lot better. I feel basically 100%. When last we spoke, I was on the verge of getting a diagnosis of having a respiratory infection, which
Hmm.
sucked, but it's not uncommon, with COVID cases. Again, I thank my lucky stars for the vaccine and the booster because it could have been a lot worse, without
Hmm.
that. But that said, it still did roll into a respiratory infection. They put me on some super strong antibiotics, and I felt bad for like 2 days, 2.5 days, and then I was feeling good. I was getting tired a lot quicker. I certainly still needed to kind of like rest and take my time, and but then I'd say by Friday. I was feeling fine, and yesterday was great. Just spent the whole day with the kids, and let Jess have kind of a day out, to herself. Well, actually, she was with her friend, but and it was awesome. Just hanging out with the kids all day, and go to the park, get an ice cream because that's what we do. And
Oh, sure.
yeah, so I'm back, man. I'm feeling great.
Awesome.
I don't even, I,
Fantastic.
I barely even have a cough. Like every once in a while, like I have a little cough and I recognize it's like, oh, there's still something a little bit there. But yeah, for the most part, I feel great.
Sure. I will say I had COVID right at the beginning, and every once in a while, I still feel like I have a little cough, which I don't know. I've had constant allergies like well before COVID, so
Oh,
sometimes
sure.
I don't know if it's allergies or remnants of COVID.
Right.
Who knows? But glad you're back.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm glad to be here. I'm excited. I'm excited this week. We get to talk about Honeymoon Express.
Yes, we've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, I mean this
Uh,
this reaffirmed my love of the episode rewatching it this time around. There's a particular scene which we'll talk a little bit more about later because we
sure.
wanted to talk about the fact that it's getting talked about in general, and we've talked about it at length on the podcast, even somewhat recently.
Mhm.
But that one scene reduced me to tears this time around, and I'll tell you why a little bit later
All
because
right.
it had a little bit extra on it this viewing compared to the last time I watched it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Looking forward to hearing it. I have some thoughts. I love this episode deeply in my heart. And because I love it, I can pick it apart a little bit,
All right.
which I'm going to do here a little bit as we go. Don't hang me, fans. Don't hate me. I know how much we all love this episode. I love it. I pick it apart a little bit. Before we do that, let's do some housekeeping. Find us on the web, fateswidewheel.com, fateswidewheel on all of the socials. We have our first follower on TikTok, Jill Wilson,
Whoa.
who's also a contributor. Thank you so much. I haven't put anything out there just yet. I keep meaning to, but
It's coming.
it's coming. It's busy. Like sometimes I think about throwing just like a quick like goofy thing out there, but like no, like I want to start producing like actually like good quality videos that I put time into, not just
you,
goofy stuff.
you sound like the guy that's like, well, yeah, one of these days I'm going to propose when everything's right, when we're ready for it. I'm sure that we'll be ready. It's like, if you wait around
That
for that, man,
hurts.
you'll never propose. So I'm
That
just
hurts. All
saying,
right,
dude, like,
that's fair. Maybe I should start doing.
I
Uh,
say that as being the one who's
uh,
done no work whatsoever in the TikTok arena or any of
all
our
right,
social media other than some occasional tweets. But,
sure. Fair enough. All right. So housekeeping. Our financial donors. I've already mentioned Joe Wilson. Also, thank you, Dana Bias, Audrey Ashley, Christopher Redman, Rich Bork, Karen Saxon, and Amy Holtcamp. Thank you so much.
thank you
Uh,
all very much. Your support means a lot.
um, yes. If you would like to be a financial donor, you can do that in the show notes. You can become a monthly donor on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Right now, we have no tiers. If you, we have no tiers, we have no extra things that we're giving you right now, except like thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. The only thing that we can give you right now, or are giving you right now, is that we give you a shout out every episode,
But we
like we just
will.
did. If
We
we did,
will have stuff soon.
yes.
We'll
If you want to
talk more about
do
that.
we'll talk more. Yeah. And if you want to do a one-time donation, we may set something up more fancy in the future. But for now, you can just send it to my own personal PayPal if you want to do a one-time donation. Um, Other housekeeping, please leave us a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen to Apple Podcasts, especially, that really helps us get out there. We would greatly appreciate it. I think our most recent reviews were from Karen Saxon, a longtime listener, I think new listener, Amy Holtkamp, if I remember correctly. I think she also gave us a review.
Yeah. Thank you
So
both.
thank you. And some anonymous person gave us a 1-star review that literally just said eye rolling.
Mm,
That's all it said.
fascinating.
And the headline said, please stop with the oversensitive. And then the actual body was just eye rolling. So I'm sure it had something to do with us being quote woke. But anyway, hey, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, whatever. I don't care.
But yeah, we're gonna jump into Honeymoon Express here. No new news. Hang on just 1 second.
That's not entirely
lied.
true. Yeah.
I lied to you. Let me pull that up here. Amy Holtkamp, she gave us this heads up. She wrote us a very long, nice letter that we're going to read more of it towards the end of the episode. But she dropped a tidbit at the bottom that trans writer, actor, I hope I don't pronounce this too incorrectly, Shakina Nafak, has been announced that they will be a staff writer on the reboot.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So that's fantastic.
It is. One of the things that I have to say, this is kind of going to be a weird way to get there, but hey, that's what we do. But I have recently been watching Xena Warrior Princess, or rewatching it again, and listening to a wonderful podcast along with it called Xena Warrior Podcast, hosted by 3 awesome film grads. Most of them have masters. I think one of them might even have a PhD. Doing just, wonderful work. Talking about these episodes. Never comes off as pretentious. They're not like sitting over there like dissecting it scene by scene or scene by scene. It's just, that kind of just informs, I think, that these are 3 educated women talking about this show that a lot of people kind of look at as just kind of being like popcorn or whatever. And I think that the show has definitely been kind of taken apart over the years, because we're talking about a show that's over 25 years old at this particular point in time, and has certainly been dissected in a way that proves it has kind of like cultural and artistic merit beyond just being a late night syndicated TV show or whatever. But I say all that to say, because as I'm watching this, I see all of these names involved with the show, and so many men, like producers, writers, and all this sort of stuff. And the thing is that they do a remarkable job, I'd say 90% of the time, of writing this show, that it doesn't feel like 90s men writing about women. Do you know what I mean? Like it actually does feel very like there's an honesty to it and an integrity to it that goes beyond just any sort of like weird, non-representative writer's room or director staff or whatnot. That said, having more representation and diversity, especially in the writer's room of a show like Quantum Leap, is only going to help. And I think that this is wonderful. Shakina is also a person of color, so I think that this is just a wonderful opportunity to, diversify that writer's room. Because we know that it all starts off with 2 white dudes, which they're awesome, and I thank my stars for guys like Steve and Brian for working so hard to bring the show back. But yeah, I think that it's something that will obviously go a long way towards making this show better, frankly. So I look forward to seeing what they bring to the table. And I know that that there's a lot of as far as their career goes already, they've been in Transparent, and also on NBC's Connecting, which I don't actually know much about that show at all, but it made her the first trans person to have a starring role on an American network comedy.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I was thinking of a tangent. I had a thought. It's a tangent. We're not going to go there just now. Fantastic. And thank you, Amy, for sending us that information there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the link she sent is behind a paywall. I will outsmart the paywall later on.
Eventually.
No, there's a great website out there that right now I can't think of it off the top of my head. But if you take the link to anything that's behind a paywall and you go to that website and if you type it in, it will give you the non-paywall version, but I can't think of it right now off the top of my head. Anyway, we're already going on tangents, and we're already 5 minutes in. Let's get into Honeymoon Express.
We're going to get into Honeymoon Express. All right. So before we get into Honeymoon Express in depth here, I mean, not in depth, we're just doing the revisit, so it's going to be brief, but I will give you an overview of what we're doing here. This is our Quantum Leap Revisited. Of course, we've already reviewed all of the episodes and much longer episodes of our own. We spent more time talking about Quantum Leap than Quantum Leap spent on the air. Our capsule size reviews of the classic series go by the mission to rank the show on a scale of 1 to 10, or percentage, 1 to 100%, based on 5 different categories: writing, directing, acting, production values, and mythology. Each category is weighted based on perceived importance. Writing, directing, and acting are each worth 25% of the average, production values are 15%, and mythology just 10%. Now, as I said, our original reviews sought to stimulate discussion, contextualize the episode based on when it was set, when it aired, and when our discussion took place. We also provided a lot of background information, IMDb'd it up, our personal opinions of each episode, that and a whole lot more, very deep dives. We're proud of those reviews, and of course, they will be available for listeners in our archive. However, we wanted the opportunity to revisit the episodes with only our opinion on the categories above, giving our listeners a compact rating of each episode of the classic series in the lead up to the premiere of the revival series this fall. So have our opinions changed for the better, for the worse? Will this new rubric yield results that surprise even us? Step into the accelerator and find out. So here we are with Honeymoon Express, the season 2 premiere. Dennis, tell us what IMDb says.
Season 2 premiere aired September 20th, 1989. By the way, Sam must save himself while on his honeymoon from his new bride's ex-husband. Also, Congress wants Sam to change history by stopping the U-2 flight that was shot down over Russia in 1960. A little bit inaccurate. We'll get into that later on. But anyway, starting off with writing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I love this episode. As I was watching this episode, it was hard for me in a way to even examine it too critically, to be completely honest. I found myself instead just enjoying every second of it. I'm sure that there are things that I picked at last time around. There are probably little nitpicky things here or there. But the fact of the matter is this episode was responsible for some of the finest scenes in the entire series. And for that reason, along with many others, I gave it a 10 out of 10. I just think it's well written. I think that there are scenes, there are scenes just based off of the writing alone that is some of the best writing in the history of the whole series. The scene with Al and Sam in particular, when they think it might be goodbye. But even the exposition dumps in the, in Congress are handled so well. Even kind of the hokiness of the idea that Al is trying to sell Congress on the idea that he and Sam have decided God must be the one in control of Sam's leaps, which, by the way, they've not decided that. And if they have, it's been off the air unbeknownst to us, because nowhere in the first season do they ever say, hey, you know what? It must be God. So even in the midst of all of that, it's all pulled off really well. I think the characters are really well drawn. There's a lot of fun stuff too. And I think that ultimately the episode gives Sam and Al opportunities to shine and be exactly who Sam and Al are supposed to be in my mind. Like if I had to introduce a new writer to the show and I had to get them up to speed and I had to say we're in season 4 or something and they're like, how do I write these characters? I've never seen your show before or whatever, which obviously wouldn't happen. But besides that, I would just give them a copy of Honeymoon Express and say, there, you're off to the races. So for that, again, and many other reasons, I gave it a
10. Everything that you said in the plus column for this episode, I don't argue with any of that one bit. I've said before, this is kind of tangential to the writing, or it is about the writing. In my head canon, Al was not an admiral in the first season. Sam changes history in some way between season 1 and season 2 that makes Al an admiral. And part of that I back up with the fact that Dean Stockwell did not know that Al was an admiral until he got the script for this episode. That was a total surprise to him. And in some interview he gave, he said, he totally had to rethink how he played the character. Yeah. So that's part of my headcanon. Take that for what you will. The thing that struck me with the writing that dings it for me upon this rewatch is it came and it popped up to me as soon as I saw the writing credit on this episode, written by Don Bellisario. And I think like we've talked before, like what little we know about like Don, like who he is as a person. Like he has said before, like Al's libido all comes from him. Like the womanizing aspect all comes from him. And what I remember from this episode, I haven't watched this episode since we reviewed it for the last, for the longer episode that we just did. So it would have been like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. It is a part of the episode that Diana, like she is very much interested in having sex with her newlywed husband, which creates like one of the interesting subplots of the episode that, Sam is trying to avoid sleeping with this woman who is not his wife, who he is not in love with, ... yet. But in a lot of the monologues that Diane has, she is written like a man's fantasy of what a woman says to her man, to her husband. I don't like her one line. I don't really think I knew what love was until I met you. Things.
You know what? I'm going to argue on that one, and here's the reason
Sure.
why. The reason why is because she's coming from a horrible, abusive relationship with Roger. It's clear that this is someone that probably had a hard time trusting themselves and loving themselves and understanding what it was to be in a healthy relationship. So I think saying something like that to Sam is actually, I actually like that. I think you're letting your bias towards Don Bellisario, understandably so, get in the way of maybe taking in some of the like it's okay for someone to say that to another person.
Sure. And I think maybe it's between that and the way a lot of those lines are delivered. It's done in this very melodramatic way. Like I said, like it's almost like this fantasy of what a man would have about like what a woman is saying to her husband about these things. But I will give you that I may have some of my bias against Don Bellisario coloring it. Like if this episode had been written by Deborah Pratt, wouldn't bug me at all.
Wouldn't think twice, yeah.
Yeah, but I think when it comes to topics like this, you do have to pay attention to the gender of the person who is writing the episode, and
that goes back to exactly what we were talking about before we started. Yep, no, exactly. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I think I think that there's merit to what you're saying. I certainly don't want to discount it. I think the reason why I disagree with it is because maybe I'm just biased towards the episode because I just love the episode to pieces. And so, sure. For me, I look at it as her not being some sort of odd male fantasy. I look at it as this is someone who has waited to be in a healthy relationship and is on her honeymoon. And, let's face it, like, it's kind of what you do on your honeymoon, right? You say all the nice things, you get naked a lot, you know what I mean? Like,
sure, yeah. And I guess it's not, I've been trying to think of like other examples, and I should have jotted this down better as I was watching the episode. It's the conversation that she has with Sam immediately after Roger's first appearance, when she's like, "You must hate me. I didn't tell you the truth. If I didn't tell you, then maybe it didn't happen for me." And again, it's part of the writing and it's part of the delivery that threw me off this time.
All right.
And like I said, I give this caveat every time. This is just where the episode caught me this time as I watched.
Of course. Yes. That is valid. That is totally valid. Because, you're saying things that actually want to make me want to go back and take another look at it, to kind of maybe take those, rose-colored glasses off my eyes and see it from this perspective. Because, again, I do think that there's merit to what you're saying. And I don't want to discount anything. I can only say that for me personally, when I was watching it, earlier today, none of what you're saying like bothered me at all, which is a surprise
Sure.
because there are plenty of times when we'll be watching episodes and exactly the types of things you're talking about certainly stand out to me,
Mhm.
and, bug the shit out of me, especially when it
Sure.
comes to Quantum Leap, because I do feel like there is that, we're the show has enough of that 80s pedigree to it, in spite
Mhm.
of, also taking place in the early 90s, or being produced in the early 90s as well. um, that it really kind of, it's before we got characters like Scully and Buffy and Xena, and you know what I mean, like it's
Sure.
taking place in a time when, women were generally the girlfriend, the comic relief, or the damsel in distress, especially on a show where your protagonist is a man. And let's face it, when it came to hour-long television dramas, you didn't have a lot of female protagonists to begin with. Those were
Mhm.
generally, it was generally a male dominated category. Certainly on the sitcom side of things, it's like women can be funny, but they can't be the hero. That sort of
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
They can be funny, they can be sexy. They can be in trouble, but they can't be the hero. And again, there are exceptions, of course, to that rule, but no, I mean, like I said, there's definitely merit to what you're saying. I know that it just didn't bother me, and I think for me personally, as I was taking it in, it was very easy to say, they're on their honeymoon. Clearly she's coming, she's coming from this place where she was clearly in this horrible relationship, with this horrible human. and
Mhm.
and and and, and again, like, there's no accident that the person she falls in love with and marries is a cop, like somebody whose
Sure.
job is to serve and protect, right? I mean,
Sure.
there's a whole other place we could go with that, but for the purposes of this episode, in the context of, where it
Sure.
was coming from. But yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I hear you though. I hear you. What's
Sure. I get.
what else?
Uh, so overall, my score was 6 out of 10. Again, if you're new to this new scoring system, I
Damn.
I I have the rule I cannot give anything a 7 because 7 is a safe choice. 7 is off the table. So
I
between a
love being
six and
safe.
yeah, but between a 6 and an 8, I give it a 6. One tangent I don't want to like have this go completely off the rails, but if you're a relatively new listener, um, something that we really dove deep into in the original recap of this episode. If you want to go back, and I'll link it in the show notes. This is the first time in the series, like it really brings up the idea of informed consent.
Hmm.
And is it okay for Sam to ever sleep with anyone on a leap with the fact that they can't truly know who they are sleeping with?
Right.
We talk a lot about how a big deal is made of like it's not okay for Sam to sleep with her because he's not in love with her yet. We don't really talk about it's not okay to sleep with her because she doesn't know who
She
she's
thinks
really
I'm somebody else, right?
because she thinks that he's somebody else.
Yeah.
Like I said, we talk about that a lot. I think we had, if I remember correctly, we had our friend Annie. I think Betsy was on the episode. I think
Hmm.
Jessica was on the episode, and so we talked a lot about that. So if that topic at all interests you, I'll put it in the show notes. Go back and listen to our original episode
And
on
in
that.
7 or 8 episodes from now, the whole new can of worms gets opened up. So go listen to Catch a Falling Star.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. And one other thing that I'll add, especially viewed as a reintroduction to the series, it was written when the show, like a second season was not guaranteed. We know that, and the fact that, I think that for Belisario, there was this idea that I want as many people watching this show as possible. I want this to feel kind of like a reintroduction to the show, and I think it accomplishes that very, very well, especially establishing who Sam is, who Al is, who they are to each other, the stakes of the project. Which, unfortunately, the saddest part about Honeymoon Express in many ways, it's the number of things that don't ever get followed up on. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to mythology, but introducing the fact that Sam has never killed before, until spoilers, the end of this episode, which is a huge thread that we followed during our original, especially in season 2. Like, we talked
Mhm.
a lot about the arc of Sam as a killer, basically. So you might want to go
Sure.
back and check
But
those episodes out. But
is
yeah,
is there an arc? Is there an arc?
you know who had an arc? Noah. No.
But I feel like if I remember correctly, he kills 3 people or 4 people in the course of season 2. Roger,
Hmm.
Nikki, in her charm,
Yep.
and the two lowlives in MIA. And it goes from Honeymoon Express up. He doesn't have the eyes of a man who could kill, and he's shocked. He's taken aback. And I love Roger's line. Next time it will be easier.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm almost tempted to bump it up a point just for that.
Right.
I love
Roger
it.
is Roger is also very well written as
He is,
being kind
yes.
of like that just unhinged character.
Mm-hmm.
I mean the whole monologue he has to Sam about like the Gestapo coming in and looking for resistance members and the person that ratted them out, and then but I killed her, and then finding out that it's his mother, and you're just like, this guy is but at the same time you're thinking about where that came from, right? What that was born out of, the uncertainty of that particular time. And again,
Sure.
anyone who's interested in hearing a more thorough and in-depth discussion of some of the things that we're talking about, please do go back to our original episode, because we go very in depth about things like the French Resistance and Nazis and et cetera, et cetera. And we talk a little bit more about these things. But I do think that, again, just the overall writing of these characters, it holds up. And again, the tension of like the congressional scenes and the reveal at the end. Anyway,
Sure.
yeah.
Moving on.
Okay.
Directing.
Let's talk about directing. So it's interesting because directing is one of those that I struggled with the most on this particular episode, because there are very few like moments that really, like made me just kind of like lean forward and be like, oh wow, that's such an interesting choice or whatnot. But the thing that ultimately I really I was thinking about this in the car on the way back from the grocery store as I watched the episode, went to the grocery store, and as I was coming back, I was thinking about how immersive the episode felt. Like the way that it's shot, and I think part of this is the technical limitations of shooting like on a train car, but the way that it's shot, I feel like I'm on the train.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm in the hearing room with Congress. Like I feel for some reason there's something, and I don't have the vocabulary. I mean, yeah, I've taken a few film classes, I listen to audio commentaries on DVDs, but ultimately at the end of the day, like I don't have the vocabulary to properly articulate exactly what it is that is used or done that makes me feel this way. But for me personally, I just felt like I was really in the episode. I'm not just an observer, no pun intended. And that I really liked that. I liked that a lot. And there's something about like the claustrophobia of being on the train at times that really helped to kind of amp up the tension. All the night shots like outside of the train,
Mm-hmm.
when the way that the whole chase and tussle with Roger and then his goon is done.
Henri, yeah.
Yeah, Henri, yeah, is done really well. So much of it I feel like is so well composed, well thought out. We'll talk more about it later, but the near goodbye between Sam and Al,
Mm-hmm.
just the entire way that is shot and cut is done so well. And then of course Sam going through the door with the the glass window and Al standing there for a moment. So
Mm-hmm.
I overall it was one of those things where it's like there's nothing that makes me go, wow, this is incredible. At the same time, there was nothing that made me say anything bad about it, and I'm just so in love with the episode. I give it a 9.
Oh, great. I gave it an 8 uh, for everything that you said, but I think I don't think it's a bad thing that there's nothing in the episode that make you jump out and go, wow. I mean, because
Right.
sometimes I think it's a strength of a thing. It's like a theater teacher like said in college, like if you notice, if there's any aspect of a show that takes you out of the show and makes you go, oh, that lighting is an interesting choice, or
Right.
that's an interesting bit of blocking. If there's anything that takes you out of the show, then it's a bad choice. And like the best choices are the ones that let you just get fully lost
Right.
into the story. So that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
So like I said, for all the things you said, especially like the night scene outside, uh just like the action scene, like what they were able to do and just suggest by way of like what they show and what they don't show you. The fact
Yeah.
that like Henri gets pulled
Right.
underneath the train, and you get the classic like Hollywood
Right. Right.
um screaming. Even the way like they shoot the final confrontation scene between Sam Roget
Yeah. Whew.
and Diane.
Yeah.
um and I guess I'm going to dip back into the writing category for a bit. The way Diane is with Roget, I love the way that that scene was written, and I love the way that scene was played,
Yeah.
because like there's someone who knows how to deal with their abuser
Right.
and
Yeah.
and try to calm them down and try to bring them down.
Right.
Um, so for the writing and the direction of that scene, especially like, I mean, you can't. I mean, they're just like in a small space. Like you can't do much like action wise
Yeah. So
with that.
yes, and so much of that segues really nicely into acting as well, because I feel like the other thing, because it is so claustrophobic at times and things are so up close, so much of the acting is kind of like neck up. You know what I mean? Like it's, you
Mm-hmm.
don't get the opportunity to have a lot of that other stuff. We really get to focus on these characters' eyes a lot, and I love that. And it helps because it fuels the more intimate moments, obviously between Diane and Sam, but it also fuels those moments of tension, including that that climactic scene between the three of them. Um, the acting in this particular episode, it, for a show that only had 8 episodes under its belt, um, the what they're able to do in particular with the relationship between Sam and Al. I mean, it's just a testament to the reason why these guys were nominated for Emmys. That this wasn't just like this. It wasn't just this genre show that had like a cult following. It was critically acclaimed during its time. Now, yeah, there were plenty of critics out there that were just sort of like, okay, like some of these episodes are not great, and I find myself being among that
Mm-hmm.
camp because some of the episodes are not that great. But when it's right, you're getting some of the highest quality acting that you were probably getting on television in 1989, quite frankly. You're getting
Mm-hmm.
some fantastic writing, you're getting some wonderful directing on a budget, although I think this episode, it seems to me by watching it, it looked like the budget was a little higher than what we'd seen prior, except for maybe the pilot. um
Really?
I don't know. I felt like maybe not. Nothing stood out to me as being, let me put it this way. This goes into directing and production values.
Sure.
Nothing made me think, whoa, they're really shooting this on a shoestring budget.
Wow. Did the fact that they were obviously like shooting in front of a screen, like for the window shots, like out the train, did that not bug you?
Didn't bug me because it's not nearly as
Okay.
bad as the car in Starcrossed.
Oh, you think?
Oh, God, the car in Starcrossed looks like somebody's back there with a flashlight, basically, doing like this. Like it was like the car in Starcrossed is awful. Awful. Like that's
All right.
literally like I could have shot that in junior high. Like it's
All
not
right.
great.
All right.
Yeah, I
I
thought
mean,
this was fine.
I'm not knocking anything. Like I said before, like back at Starcross, like to me, like in my head, like having things look kind of janky in regards to anything moving, like that's so just like burned into my brain from that era. Like it's almost theatrical, and it's a conceit, and it does not bug me at all.
You know what it could be too, and this is something that I've been thinking about in general because I've been while I was isolated and alone for almost two
Sure.
weeks. One of the things that I was doing was actually doing some reading on like television on DVD
Mhm.
and Blu-ray, because I do believe that for the most part physical media often is the best representation. Streaming is great, when there are advances in streaming that I think most people would probably never be able to tell the difference. That said, there are obviously, like for me, when I watch the X-Files on Hulu compared to when I put my Blu-rays in, there's a difference, and like and it's the reason why I'm never going to get rid of my Blu-rays. So the reason I bring that up, season one, probably, especially only being 8 episodes, being their first season, I wonder how much it got in, when it was mastered and authored the first time around, and what they're pulling from, what Mill Creek was pulling from. I wonder, it's like, what were they actually, remastering? What did they actually have to work with? Because Honeymoon Express looks almost right off the bat looks like how I want a television show from 1989 on Blu-ray to look. Whereas none of the episodes in season one, as great as they look on occasion, certainly better than I think they look anywhere else, don't look as good as this. And so maybe that tinted my perspective a bit when
Okay.
thinking about
Sure.
budget, because it just looked fresh.
It
It
looks
looked,
good.
yeah, it
Sure.
looks good. So yeah, I don't know, but that let's get back to acting.
Sure.
So overall, I really enjoy the performances. I think I understand where you're coming from when we're talking about writing about Diane, and maybe you didn't necessarily mean that about her acting specifically. But for me, I mean, I enjoy everything she does. I enjoy the fact that the scenes with Sam are done in such a way that there is this genuine tension for the character of Sam, and I can understand why he would be interested in her beyond just the prospect of physical intimacy, the prospect of
Mhm.
someone parading around in negligee. Like, even though most of the time what we're given is basically, for lack of better terms, to be extremely frank, somebody who's really horny on their honeymoon. Like,
Sure.
even though that's what we're given a lot of times, there's more there. There's more depth there, and I give a lot of the
Sure.
credit to the
Hmm.
actor for that. Now, obviously, there's also the idea that it's written that she's studying to take the bar exam and everything, and be a lawyer, and that I think also adds a new layer to the character. She's someone looking for justice, and all that. I think again, like you said, the scene with Roger and the stuff that she has, I think really helps to add to that depth of the character, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate again, Roger. I think is fantastic. I mean, Roger is the first in a long line of. I mean, maybe not the first. We obviously just came from Play It Again Seymour, but I think Roger becomes the first really truly to be established as like the killer of the week, which
Hmm.
unfortunately
Yep.
gets overused as the show goes on,
Sure.
and we're in agreement on that. But in this episode, it works like gangbusters, and I think the actor pulls it off spectacularly. Um, but what it really all comes down to for me, and the reason why I mean, I was compelled to give it the score that I give it, is everything with Dean and Scott.
Hmm.
And watching, I'm gonna get emotional. Watching the scene where they almost say goodbye really hit me this time around, because we were, as fans, robbed of any potential for a scene like that in Mirror Image for multiple reasons. It's hard to blame the team for that. We will never we will never actually be able to get that scene.
Yeah.
Um and it's it's silly, it's a TV show, right? But thinking about what the revival means and the promise of the revival and the potential for Scott's involvement in the revival, we know that we can't have Dean back. We know we can't have
Hmm.
Al back, and the closest we ever got to the two of them being able to share an embrace, it made me think a lot about, if the revival series gets Sam back, the catharsis of seeing Sam embrace Al when he gets
Hmm.
when he gets home
Sure.
has been we've been robbed of that.
Yeah.
Sam's been robbed of that. Hell, as silly as it sounds, Scott has been robbed of that.
Sure.
And maybe that's a little hyperbolic, but ultimately I feel like it gave this scene even more weight. And obviously, that's something that neither the actors or Don Belisario or the
Sure.
director, anybody, knew at the time. But viewing it now, man, it really is. It's just it's a scene that at once I thought was fantastic, one of my favorite scenes in the show, has become one of the most important scenes in the show. And it's acted perfectly. It's acted perfectly because Sam is clearly getting emotional, having a hard time with this, and Al is doing everything he can to just be like, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna be
Hmm.
fine. You're gonna, when he's just, his heart is breaking inside as well.
Sure.
Add to that, they throw in the music, and
Hmm.
I was done. I was done.
Yeah.
So anyway, all that said, I give the acting a 10.
Yeah. Uh, I braced myself up for that scene when I was watching it this afternoon. Um, another one of the newer Quantum Leap podcasts, The Waiting Room. I think it's The Waiting Room pod. They did the recap of this episode a few weeks ago, and one of the hosts talked a lot about how, in light of Dean Stockwell's passing, like you can't. They kind of put a different spin on it. And I thought this is where you were going, but they kind of put a different spin on like this is like as close as like is what we're seeing like Scott and Dean saying goodbye to each other as Scott and Dean in anything, and in light of his passing. And we were talking about this before off mic before we started recording. This particular scene has been being talked a lot about on Quantum Leap Twitter right now as an example of like Sam and Al's like deep relationship. So I kind of braced myself up as I watched it this time. And now listening to what you're saying, I am finding myself once again getting angry over Mirror Image, because my biggest problem with Mirror Image is they have two scenes together and it's not a satisfying scene, because all Al thinks that is happening is that Sam is becoming mentally unstable. And you say that, and if you're watching this on video, if we put this video out, if you saw my face kind of like twist when you said that there's nothing the team could have done about it, they could have done something about it. Hell yeah, they could have done something about it. Don Bellisario, when he wrote that last episode, he knew damn well it was very likely the last episode. So he could have actually given something more satisfying.
Sure.
To that.
And the thing is it's like I don't even have a problem with the fact, like I have talked before about how the final title card, Dr. Sam Beckett never returned home, like slayed me as a kid. Like what was I 12 years old I think when the finale aired, just about to turn 13 maybe. No, I was 11 about to turn 12. Anyway, doesn't matter. Point is, I mean, I had not cried that hard except for maybe like 2 other occasions in my life. Like literally, like it slayed me. That said, I have always been a staunch defender of the decision to have it end that way. It for me, there was something about it that, like, there aren't always happy endings. You can't always get what you want. At the same time, there just might be somebody out there looking out for all of us, giving up everything of themselves to look after all of us, and that to me, like, it never bothered me. Anyway, that said, I agree with you. I think you're absolutely right. And wouldn't it have been wonderful if, using the magic of Al's place and Mirror Image, if at one point they're sitting out there on the front porch of the bar and they're having this conversation, and it's a deep, wonderful conversation, and it's the emotional conversation we wish they would have all had in Mirror Image. And at one point, Sam just reaches over, instinctually without thinking about it, to put his arm around Al, and he touches him. And he can feel him, and they have this big embrace, and they hug one another, and they're laughing and they're crying, and they don't know how this is happening. And then Sam leaps, and that's the last time that that's the last time we ever saw them together. But because of that place that he was in, with all the craziness, all the shenanigans, for whatever reason, they were able to just touch in that moment. Like, that would have been lovely. You're absolutely right. I stand corrected.
I'm gonna go deeper. God. This just popped in my head, and I'm giving you a fan wank right now. What if in the final episode, what if they had done this? Sam and bartender Al sitting on the bench, having that whole conversation about, if you were a priest, I've been a priest, so you had whatever. What if they had done like a camera cut, and from the point of the last scene where it starts with, I'm getting choked up saying this, where the line is, "Where would you like to go, Sam?" If they had done a cut and it was Al.
Yeah.
It was Al sitting next to him on the bench. I don't know what he'd be wearing. He wouldn't be wearing his Admiral outfit. He wouldn't be dressed as the bartender. He'd be something else that was very Al. And it wouldn't even have to be a full embrace. It would have just been the arm around Sam that Al, the bartender, gave him.
Yeah.
You could have done that. You wouldn't need to explain it. Just do it. You could have had the final episode be everything else, and it would have been more satisfying. But that's not what they did. Anyway, for Honeymoon Express, I gave the acting 8 out of 10.
There you go. Production values. Again, I thought production values were fine. Nothing really stood out to me as being horrible, terrible, out of place. We haven't even really mentioned it, but like even at the top of the show with, well, actually, it's wonderful. We get this really interesting cold open at the top of the show, of course, which is Al and the congressional hearing. But then when we come back, we see Sam in a tree, trying to get a cat out of the trees, and we see this wonderful vintage old fire car, in the background of the shot, which stuff like that is really nice. Again, just everything I thought looked good, played well. It's a little thing, but when the train conductor gives Sam the gun, or the porter gives him the gun, and he's like, it's 50 years old. Like, it's like the gun looks like it's 50 years old. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, so everything, I thought everything held together well. I went ahead and gave it a 9 out of 10.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Here's the thing about production values, and that jumped out at me, and I had never noticed it before. In episodes where we've literally had Al have costume changes in one day. He's wearing the same outfit from the firefighter leap to the first scene in Honeymoon Express, where we know from the pilot that oftentimes there are several days that happen in between leaps.
Sure.
Jumped out at me at that point.
Interesting.
As for everything else, as far as production values go, like I said, nothing stuck out, nothing whatever. I don't really have anything more intelligent to say than you did. 8 out of 10. I may have to eliminate 8 from my.
I know. I was just getting ready to say 8's your safe place.
7 and 8. They're becoming my safe place.
Yeah, no, I, you know me. I don't think it. I think it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
You score it how you score it how you score it.
Sure.
And let's face it. At the end of the day, like, not to undercut the entire endeavor, but so much of it is fairly arbitrary, right? Because it's like you said earlier. It's like this is how I felt when I watched it this time around.
Sure.
This is where I am in this particular moment, in this particular place. We might get to the end of this and I'd be like, whoa, I scored Honeymoon Express too high, because I couldn't go high enough on Black and White on Fire or whatever. Anyway. That takes us to our final category, mythology, and I think that this episode is incredibly important. I think if you're putting together your list of essential Quantum Leap episodes to watch before you watch the revival series, that Honeymoon Express has to be on your list. You cannot do without Honeymoon Express on an essential episode list of Quantum Leap, and I think it could potentially would also be on a best of list as well. So I gave it a 10 out of 10. I think everything with Congress, I think everything with the relationship between Sam and Al. I think even one of the things I neglected to mention the writing earlier. Even the moments when Sam is basically like looking for something to step in, it's like, what do you want me to do here? He's talking to God, Time, Fate, or whoever.
Sure.
And there are those little twists of fate that occur, that keep him from, consummating the marriage with Diane, that flip the pages, in the book, so he can ask her the question, which, ends up being the question that she missed originally in the timeline, which kept her from,
Sure.
Winning her congressional seat and all this sort of stuff. Like, all those little things, I think play in wonderfully just with the conceit of the show as well, inform the conceit of the show. I just gave it a 10 because I was, again, I was feeling generous with Honeymoon Express. And again, I mean, I feel like there are very few episodes when it comes to the mythology that I feel like I could give it that high of a rating. I think when it comes down to it, you've got Genesis, you've got Honeymoon Express, you've got Leap Back, you've got obviously Leap Home, and MIA, and then Mirror Image. And other than that, like, I obviously in viewing episodes I might change my mind, but other than that, I can't think of many other episodes that I would give a 10 to. So
Sure.
I feel like this one deserves it because as far as I'm concerned, it conveys the same amount of information that are important to the overall understanding of Quantum Leap in general as any of those other episodes I mentioned. So it gets a 10.
Sure. All the things you said, I gave it 9 out of 10.
Fantastic.
Wasn't feeling as generous, but hey,
I was in
there we go.
mood.
Yeah, the only thing I will say in addition, and I've said this before, this is a storyline I wish they would have kept going throughout the series.
Yep.
Like the constant fight for funding and to stay afloat. I would love to have seen more scenes with Al back in the present having these fights. I have a feeling we are going to get a lot more scenes like this.
Yeah.
In the new series, if not fighting for like a budget and to stay afloat, I think there's going to be a lot more fights with the Pentagon or the
Magic's
Senate
going
over
to be
like
on the
what
phone
the hell
with
are you
people
doing?
like once an episode, I bet. Like, you know what I mean? Like literally, like
Sure.
I would not be surprised if that, becomes like a just a a running gag almost where Magic has to be on the
Sure.
phone, buying more time or money or,
Here's what I want for the new series. I want this to be a running comedic bit. I want Project Quantum Leap to never admit to the Pentagon that Ben has leaped. And
uh,
it's a comedy of errors. It's farcical, keeping that away from the Senate. Like they come to
yeah,
visit, Ben's not here. Where's Ben?
right.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Just make it a comedy. I don't know. I'm
right.
not one of the writers. Uh, I don't know.
I'd be fine with that. I think that would be amusing. I think that let's face it. Like, I think that Quantum Leap has had a lot of opportunities to do comedy well, and Quantum Leap has done a lot of bad comedy as well. So I'd love for the new show to take a few swings. And
Yeah.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. I'm glad you brought that up because that was also one of the things that, when we started talking about the episode that I wanted to come back to with Mythology. I feel like, unfortunately, it is one of the failings of the show as a whole, and not just the show. I would lay this indictment out to all of television at the time, because again, we're pre X-Files, we're pre Buffy, we're pre Babylon 5, like a lot of those shows for American television, especially for American genre television, that really ratcheted up the continuity and the serialization of primetime dramas, and so I think that unfortunately they did not take the opportunity that they were given with this episode to really capitalize on some of those running through lines, including like fighting with the government for funding, proving that Sam's still out there. Also having to shut Ziggy off because they were trying to save money. Like, how cool would it have been to see more episodes where it's like Sam's not sure what he's there to do because Ziggy's, you know what I mean? Like, yes, there are other episodes that Ziggy doesn't want to give an answer, or Ziggy's, on the fritz or whatever. That does happen. But, for budgetary reasons, it's like, to see those moments with Al in the control room, like kind of like, Gushy, you've got to do this. We don't have the money to do it. It's like,
what I want to address, like there is the one line where they say like they can't look up a thing because we pulled money from research. Like, you don't pull money from research. Like, yeah, I move somebody from the motor pool. Like, what is the motor pool doing? Like, who are they?
Right.
Who are they carting around?
How many vehicles do you have?
and I can't decide if Al is being genuine or he's pulling an excuse out of his ass.
Right.
And I think it's the latter.
I think it is too. I think it's also the idea that it's like, you're right, Sam. We don't pull money from research because research is all we do. So when we have to pull money from something, it's from research because we don't spend money on anything else. We don't have a motor pool. We don't have a cafeteria. We don't have, you know what I mean? Like I have always preferred the notion and the idea that Project Quantum Leap was extremely small, that this was not like, it was not some like military base with hundreds of people working there or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I've always preferred the idea that it's like 20 people, that it's that it was just this, that like the original setup was Dr. Sam Beckett led a group of scientists, into the desert and that's it. It's not some huge project. This isn't well, the name escapes me now. I can't believe I'm forgetting this, but it wasn't the project for the atomic bomb. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that. So, I've always preferred a smaller project. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit bigger. Even with the screenshots we've already seen, I mean, the project itself looks, we know there's more than one room. We know there are offices. You know what I mean? Like, we know that in the revival, we're going to see that, as opposed to in the original show, we saw like, the waiting room, kind of the imaging chamber, and the control room. That's it. That's all we ever
the
really
halls
saw. Yeah, well, right, yeah. So
the hallways, yeah.
It is unfortunate that we didn't see more follow-up on some of these threads, and it's unfortunate in a way that we didn't see some of these characters come back, like Diane, for instance. Like, I think, wouldn't it have been cool to have, like, and I get why it didn't happen, but to have a recurring appearance every once in a while. Like, she's the one maybe that Al has, the relationship with now, so that Al is like talking to her. Like, that would have been kind of neat.
Sure. Here's the thing I want to say about Diane, and this, I can't decide if this falls under writing, directing, acting, all of the above. I'm going to take it off of acting because I don't think this was Alice Adair's choice. And this is the one flaw. And actually, Joe Wilson, she already wrote us an email for Honeymoon Express that we'll read a little bit more of it here later on. it didn't jump out at me as a kid, but now that I'm an adult and much closer to Diane's age in the future than I am to Diane's age in the past,
Sure.
Diana is at the most like mid 50s, late 50s
Right.
in the final scene. One, the makeup is horrible.
Yeah.
Like you can literally see the drawn in wrinkle lines.
It's no old Biff in Back to the Future.
It's no old Biff in Back to the Future, and old Biff in Back to the Future isn't that great. But the way that she's played so old, it's like she's not that old, and
Right.
young Diana was like young and full of life. Like I would have loved to have seen like Diana, just like yeah, she looks older, but she's
Well, especially when you see like Nancy Pelosi, who's like in her 80s, you know what I mean? And
you know,
you're just sort of like, oh, okay, you know. But yeah, you're
yeah,
right. She definitely has played old, and I think part of that is probably also the idea that like the conceit of television, the conceit of the scene is that they are attempting to portray these 35 intervening years, and so there has to be a difference. Do you know what I mean? And so they
sure,
go a little overboard as opposed to like you're saying maybe not doing
sure.
quite as much.
Maybe a little less Lorraine McFly
Yes.
at the start of Back to the Future, and a little more Lorraine McFly at the end of Back to the Future.
Yes.
You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Uh, so that's all.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like I said, I'm gonna take that off because I have a feeling that was much less Alice Adair's choice. And
Right.
like you put the costume, you put the makeup on, like you're kind of forced to play it a certain way.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
And that's how it's done.
especially when you look when we see later on, obviously, like we see the picture of young Al in MIA, right? And then we
Sure.
see Al in present day.
Mhm.
Like that could have been a great example too, right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
Stockwell doesn't look that different. You know what I mean? Like maybe there's a little more gravel in his voice, but
But
a little gray in the hair, bags under the eyes, but
yeah.
it's not.
But
Yeah,
as we learned from Leap for Lisa, he always had that gravel in his voice.
that's right. That's right.
Just
Yes,
a little bit higher.
And he looked like pop star, near pop star James Walters. So
You couldn't give him pop star. You had to give him a near.
well, he did have a #1 song at one time, so I kind of felt like I had to
Yes, I got you. I got you. Well, if we don't have anything more to add, so we shift into some listener mail.
We
Here.
definitely should.
We got a
We went
couple letters to share this week. First one from Jill Wilson, already getting the jump, giving us some feedback on Honeymoon Express before we even put the episode out there. But yeah, I want to share some thoughts here. First, I love the fact that in this episode, Sam starts displaying his moral code, which pretty much continues throughout the following seasons. He expresses how wrong it would be to sleep with someone he just met or someone he did not love. I don't think the show would have been a success if Sam continued to be a character who was promiscuous. I wonder what her thoughts of Sam sleeping with Dixie in The Right Hand of God. Anyway,
right.
Besides having that contrast between Sam and Al really helped develop the chemistry between the two beloved characters, which was key to the success of the series. Another scene in this episode that helped develop that chemistry is when Al was trying to tell Sam he really needs to get Diane to call his father about aborting the mission of the U2 spy plane. It melts my heart when Sam realizes that if he doesn't try to stop the U2, the project gets cut and he may never see Al again. We are now starting to see that loving friendship bond between the two of them. But all of Al's best efforts for saving the project and his dear friend were in vain because in the end, God was in control and knew what it was going what it was going to do to take to save Sam and the project, getting Diane to pass the bar. Kind of like what you said with your
It's at this point that Quantum Leap becomes Highway to Heaven. No, I'm sorry. We joked about that a few times way back when.
We have absolutely and then finally she makes a few words about Diane's acting. The actor plays Diane, like some of her is okay, and she also makes the comment of like, what the hell was up with Diane being so old and decrepit in that that final scene. Looking more like she was in her 80s than in her 60s. And like I said, I think even with the math, I think she's more like just like mid to late 50s. So yeah.
Oh,
I agree with all that.
One thing I
Thanks
do
for sharing,
too.
Joe.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. One thing that I will say that I forgot to mention when we were talking about the episode specifically too is that this is the first time I think that we get like on-screen confirmation that the project was created using Al and Sam's brainwaves. Like the
Yep.
idea being that like that there clearly was a relationship between the two of these individuals prior to the project. Because as you even pointed out at one point, I think about Genesis, about there's this like there's almost this vibe that they don't like Al's kind of just there. Like there doesn't seem to be this the level of friendship, you know,
Sure.
that we see later, especially as it's, you know, kind of set up in Honeymoon Express. Whereas this episode kind of just, you know, lays it right out there that the project really only works because of the two of them.
Mhm.
You know, man, I just started thinking about that scene again. It's just, whew.
No, yeah, totally get it.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. Yes. I do like that. I also love, I don't think we talked about Starcrossed. I love the fact that even when they grab Al and drag him out of the imaging chamber, you don't even see them then.
right.
You know what I
Sam can
mean?
only see Al. Yep.
Yeah, I
It
kind of wish they would have kept more of that conceit later on, but then we would have been robbed some other great scenes later. But anyway, yeah,
Right. Well, but to be fair, you know, in Shock Theater, I mean, the only reason he can see Dr. Beeks is because they're using all this extra power in order to project her image as long as, you know, as long as Al is holding her. Like we're
yeah,
basically given the notion that like this shouldn't even be possible even if Al is holding her hand. We're just using all the power we've got to do this.
yeah.
You
I
won't be able
think
to hear her, but, you
I
know,
uh correct. Yes, I think yeah. I don't think they make much comment about the power in that one, but in Raped, they make a big deal about the power
mm,
because also Sam has to be able to hear her
right.
as well in that one. Uh, I think it was like enough power to light up St. Louis for a month. I think that was the line.
Nice.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, was a nice hat tip to Sam's hometown.
To Scott's hometown, yeah.
Yeah, the Scott's
Yeah.
hometown. Yeah.
They're
Anyway,
inseparable at this point.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. All right. It's late. We're getting tired. Anyway, Amy Holtkamp, she sent us a very nice longer letter. We're not going to share the entire thing because I stumble over my words well enough with a short letter, as you just
But
saw with me with Jill.
it was really lovely though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
very lovely. So we're going to reach out to Amy with Amy's permission. We're going to put the entire thing up on our Facebook page or our website. I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs that really jumped out to me. I went to a very white high school where, for our senior Halloween pageant, over half of my senior class came in blackface. We discussed the incident for weeks in various classes, with most of my classmates and many teachers voicing the opinion that it was no big deal. I was pretty shy back then about voicing my opinion on anything controversial, but I remember thinking consciously some version of, what would Sam Beckett do? I have asked that question many times myself, and literally told myself to just pretend that Sam had leaped into my body during these arguments to get myself to speak up about how wrong it was to use blackface. I'm sure my parents are should also get some credit for my quote bleeding heart, as it used to be called, or I guess it's now my wokeness. But Quantum Leap also left an indelible mark on how I walk through the world, how I think about empathy, and how I see our quote politics as an expression of a myriad of human stories, struggles, and relationships. Which brings me to the new series. I am excited about it as a continuation of something I love, and by the prospect that the childhood trauma of Sam Beckett never returned home, complete with the misspelled Beckett, might
Yeah.
be rectified. But I am thrilled by the diverse cast. It was actually only when I saw the diverse casting of the show that I relaxed about whether the new show would honor the classic one. The classic series was all about getting us to shift our perspective and look at the world through someone else's eyes. To me, this commitment to exploring different perspectives is the essential element of Quantum Leap, not the time period of 1953 to 1995, not the hand link, not even Scott and Dean. And I love Scott and Dean. I have a framed picture of them over my desk. I love them, but I can't help but think the reason both of them always talked with such affection about the show and the fans was not just because QWell brought them fame and money, but because they knew that they had created something that was bigger than just a show that ran for a few seasons. Together with other actors, writers, directors, and designers, and the amazing Deborah Pratt, they created a whole world. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah.
With Amy's permission, we'll share the rest. Thank you for sharing that. I really
Yeah,
appreciate that.
thank you so much, Amy, and thank you also for sharing the information about Shakina Neifek and the fact that she'll be a staff writer on the show. We actually, while we took a brief break, as you'll notice probably from the video join at the very least, if not the audio join, but I went ahead and retweeted Shakina's tweet that showed that she is indeed a staff writer on the show, and tagged her in it. Yeah, I agree. I agree with so much of what Amy says, and I think that something that really hit me and is a wonderful new tool in the toolbox of arguments against those that seem to think that Quantum Leap is Sam and Al / Scott and Dean, is that yeah, Scott and Dean took a lot of pride in the work that they did, and part of the reason why they took that pride, and the same thing with Deborah Pratt, as we've seen and can extrapolate from interviews with her, including the one that the Quantum Leap podcast recently did, they would rather see this world, that they created, this universe that they created, continue on and tell new stories with new people, than they would have it just stay in the mothballs and purely be a nostalgia act that people pop in their Blu-rays or stream on TV. And what better way, right, to honor the memory of Dean than to continue with this story, and knowing for a fact that his character is named and pictured in the pilot. Like, I mean, I'm saying that, I'm just sort of like, I still don't know how I'm going to feel when I see it. I know how I felt when I read it, much less how I feel when I see it. So it's
sure.
It is. I mean, there is an element of tribute here, but there's also this element of, like, perhaps the best tribute in the world is to continue telling stories using this sandbox that they helped create, as opposed to just letting it be a project kept in mothballs that Sam Beckett never returns home to.
I know, right? Do I want to be snarky? Sam,
Go
do I want to be snarky? I'm going to be snarky. I'm going to be snarky. I'm going to be, me, I'm Team Deborah Pratt. And she says it in so many words in her interview with the Quantum Leap podcast. You know why Quantum Leap sat in mothballs for so many years?
Yeah.
Don Belisario would not release creative control.
Yeah.
He wanted to do it his way or no way, and finally he gave it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and quite frankly, he got pushed out of some of his own properties, and there's, if you read between the lines, part of the reason why he got pushed out of NCIS is because he allowed a pattern of behavior to occur that was unacceptable.
I know we've talked about this before.
Oh, allegations against Michael Weatherly.
Oh, no. I know we've talked about this before, but now, was this a thing where he's been pushed out of projects and he wasn't making money anymore, so he needed some Quantum Leap money?
I mean, you would think with somebody who's been doing this as long as he's been doing this, but you hear stories all the time about people that stop working for one reason or another, and then all of a sudden they're broke. So who knows?
Anyway, as we do the tangents, they go.
I don't want to cast any aspersions.
I will cast aspersions. Anyway.
Joe, Amy, thank you so much. We always love it when we get listener mail of any kind, and we are going to be much better at sharing that with the audience. So if you have something that you want to say, feel free to shoot us an email.
It's in the show notes, Fate's Wide Wheel Podcast at gmail.com.
Yep, and you can keep it short, you can make it long, whatever you want. We might not be able to read the whole thing on the air. Obviously, with your permission, we'll publish it either on our Facebook, Instagram, or some such, and share it with the community. Because one of the things that is so cool right now, we were talking about this right before we started recording, Brian Green over at Al's Place has tweeted out a couple of times in the past week too about the fact that, like, he's having to add new podcasts to the website because there are so many new podcasts that have popped up just recently, and we were kind of joking about, like, the fact that we're seeing these podcasts, like, they're on, like, the 6th or 7th episode or the 10th episode or whatever, and it's just sort of like, oh, you're just starting. It's like, sure. Yeah. But I'm glad that that's happening. I'm glad that we're getting more voices talking about the show. exposing more people to the show. Obviously, like you were saying, Dennis, before we started recording, I'm sure that the big podcast networks and everything are gonna get right into the game when the new show starts, and
Sure.
then there's gonna be all sorts of stuff out there, but we'll keep plugging away. And we look forward to continuing to be a part of that conversation, and we want the whole fandom to take part, because
Yeah.
I want to see this new show. I want to
Yeah.
see this new show outlast the original. I do,
I know.
not
I
because
mean,
not because but I just want it to be be successful, and
yeah,
I want people to be talking about it, watching it, enjoying it, and I want to be a
sure.
part
I
of
mean,
that.
and here's the thing that I love, and I've said this on previous episodes. I am looking forward to the Quantum Leap fans who don't know that they're fans yet.
Yeah,
So like
totally.
like the young kids, and then they're going to see this new show. They're going to go back. They're going to go start eating up the old show. My best friend's oldest one of my best friend's oldest daughter, she's watching the series now for the
Nice.
first time, and she's loving it. And so like there's going to be all this podcast content for them to go out and soak up. Do the young ones listen to podcasts? I don't know. They're on the TikToks.
I mean, I know a lot of people listen to podcasts. I don't know what the teenagers are doing anymore. I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't know what the teenagers were doing when I was
Neither did
when
I.
I was when I was
I
a
heard about it on Monday
teenager.
mornings, like for those 15 minutes during homeroom. But
Yeah.
other than that, I had no clue.
I don't know.
I was
Yeah.
watching Quantum Leap. So,
I
so
was cruising Main Street in my hometown, cranking the Quantum Leap podcast. How about
oh,
not the podcast,
soundtrack, yeah,
the Quantum Leap soundtrack? How about that?
samesies. We would have been
Yeah,
best friends.
we would have been.
Now
But
we're
here
just
we
two
are now.
guys who talk to one another online.
Now we are just now we're two problematic white guys with a podcast. Anyway,
Oh
we try to
no.
be as least problematic as we can.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. What else have you been watching before we get out of here? Let's talk briefly about that. What else have you been watching lately?
Oh well, you got me hooked on Barry
Yes.
on HBO.
So good.
Damn it. It's good. I'm already at the start of the second season.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, really, really enjoying that. Time Traveler's Wife, we talked about
I
that.
still need to
Honestly,
get
even
on that.
yeah, even though it's way past my bedtime, there's a new episode tonight. I will probably watch it before I go to bed tonight. Still got to figure out. It's 6 episodes for the first season. I don't know if they're really planning for only one season, or what they're doing.
Right.
And I haven't been able to find anything definite online.
Okay.
I really hope that they don't leave it hanging in limbo. I really do hope that they just tell the entire full story.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
And what Strange New Worlds, watching that in enjoying the hell out of that. And I think those are my main things right now. How about you?
I need to watch Strange New Worlds. I really, really do. I've been wanting to. I just haven't started it yet. I watched a lot of television, obviously, while I was sequestered. A lot of movies. And let's see, two of the things that I did. So here's a funny story. I finally finished The Sopranos. Two things that you should know about me, and you probably do if you've listened to this podcast for the past like 5 years, is that there are two television shows that I have yet to finish, even though I love them and I watched them all the way up until like the last 5 or 6 episodes or whatever. One of them was The Sopranos, and one of them is Battlestar Galactica. I still haven't finished Battlestar Galactica. I have avoided all spoilers for Battlestar Galactica's finale. I'm happy with that. I don't know how I've managed to do it, but I'm cool with it. I'll get there one day. That said, I finally finished The Sopranos. I had not avoided spoilers for that. And I'd watched most of, I think literally the only episodes I hadn't seen were like the last 2 episodes. So I finally finished watching that. I'd say, it's a great show. There's so many things to love about it. Of course, the acting and writing are pretty stellar across the board, but it's not always an easy show to watch, obviously, especially that last season. The last season is really, really turns the screws on how horrible these people are.
Sure.
And it's difficult, I think, to reckon with, because even now I'll go back and watch the first couple of seasons, and you like Tony Soprano. You like him. It's hard not to like him. And somewhere around like season 4 in particular, you start to be like, oh, this guy's terrible. And he was always terrible, but anyway.
Yeah.
The other thing that I watched besides Barry, obviously, that I really, really enjoyed was the new Perry Mason on HBO.
Ah.
I loved it. That was one of those like destination shows when I was a kid. Watching like the black and
Mhm.
white one with my grandmother when I got home from school, and then watching the movies of the week when they were on with my parents or whatever. So I'm familiar with the original show. I've even read a couple of the books. But I thought it was great. I think Matthew Rice is fantastic in the role. I love the fact that they explore this sort of like pre, trial lawyer version of Perry Mason.
Mhm.
Um, the last episode, at first, I have to be honest, I was really disappointed with. Really disappointed. As I've sat with it now for the past like 3-4 days, I think it was actually brilliant. I don't want to spoil too much, but just the way that they're like knowing that there's going to be a second season, for instance, there's something that happens in like the final episode that really turns the entire like everything about Perry Mason on its ear in a way. And I was really frustrated because I wanted it to be the culmination of like the building of this character. And then I
Mhm.
realized it's like, well, he's not there yet. Like he's not there yet. And that to
Mhm.
me at the time was very disappointing and frustrating. But now I'm looking back on it, I'm like, that's brilliant.
Hmm.
Like he's not there
Interesting.
yet, but he will be. And when he does, man, the payoff's going to be awesome. So anyway, and I've been watching a lot of Xena because I don't know why. One day I was like,
Sure.
I got Xena
Some
DVDs. I'm gonna throw
nostalgia.
those in.
Yeah.
It's some nostalgia. Yeah.
Some responses to that. Uh, I've only seen bits and pieces of The Sopranos.
Mhm.
I have seen the last few minutes. I've
Yeah.
read an analysis of the last few minutes.
Sure.
I don't care how much it pisses anybody off.
Yeah.
Tony Soprano dies. That's him. That's him dying. That's him dying. To say that he does not die is to cheapen all of the brilliant foreshadowing that they did in that episode in the episode before previously. That's the hill I will die on. And like I said, I only watched bits and pieces of the show.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think he dies actually. And here's the reason why I say that. I think it's far more interesting to be left with the notion that he's going to be having to look over his shoulder for the rest of his life, however long that might be. And there's something about like the unease of the final scene, and of course there's the whole well, the season starts with an episode called Members Only and ends with Made in America, and then there's a guy wearing a Members Only jacket at the bar, and he goes into the bathroom, which is where Michael Corleone goes right before he offs the two guys in The Godfather, and it's clearly a nod to that, and blah blah blah, and he's going to come out of that
mm,
bathroom guns blazing, and that's the reason why it's the last, whatever. um there's a lot of weird stuff that I haven't fully unpacked, to be completely honest, from the last. One of the things that really hung with me and that I'm having difficulty like reckoning with is that Meadow never makes it into the restaurant. Like she's running across the street and she's running right up
sure.
to the door as the music cuts out and goes to black. And it's such an odd choice that the last character we see is Meadow and that she doesn't get into the restaurant. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what is it that represents? Because it's like it's clear that like AJ's probably going to get wrapped up in the family business in some fashion just because his dad's already got everything kind of sorted out for him in a way. Carmela's going to stay in this relationship because that's just what she does. Tony's going to go on being Tony. I don't know. It's weird. I could take it or leave it either way. To be completely honest with you, it doesn't bother me if one day it comes out firmly that he's dead, that's what happened in that scene. They do a sequel series or whatever, and it picks up right, after that, and he's dead. Fine, whatever. I don't really care. But I don't know. For me, there's just something about the idea of him actually still, you know, making it out of that restaurant. That's kind of more interesting to me, having to kind of live with that. And the funny thing is, David Chase has been ambiguous about it for years, and then he started talking about it, and then he started going back and forth on it, and he's like, and at one point he was like, everybody wanted him to die. No, he's not dead. And then he was on another interview and he was like, yeah, he's probably dead. So it's like, you wouldn't talk about it for years, now you've started talking about it and you're saying both things. Like,
Yeah, that's so interesting.
yeah.
Another thing I would say, and this is yet another pitch for my pitch for Sam Fain to watch The Time Traveler's Wife. You
Yes,
talk
I
about
need to watch it.
we talk about like Perry Mason, like he hasn't become that person yet. A constant refrain throughout the book, and they're doing it really well through the series, is that Henry, the time traveler, is becoming the more mature person that he is going to become, and
Mm.
Claire, his wife, is in love with the older version of Henry because that's who she meets when
Mm.
she's younger. And when she meets Henry in his late 20s, he's an asshole, he's immature. And the Henry, like older Henry and younger Henry, they constantly meet each other. And
What?
and I can't believe it. There's actually a scene in the book, and they actually do it in the thing. And they actually do more than meet when they're both 16 years old.
Oh boy.
And they do it in the book, and I was waiting to see if they did it in the series, and yes, they actually address it in the series. But anyway, so late 20s Henry and older, like late 30s, early 40s Henry, they do not like each other.
Mm-mm.
Well, especially more like young Henry doesn't like older Henry. Older Henry is like, you fucking moron.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
you have so much to learn.
Right.
Like there's one scene like in the second or third episode where they talk to each other over a payphone because older Henry has to tell younger Henry that he needs an alibi that night because of something older Henry is going to do.
Oh my God.
And the phone call ends with him going, fuck you, fuck you. And the thing, why I love it is like, it is such a perfect metaphor for like, as you grapple with yourself and who you were when you were younger,
Yeah, totally.
and who you hope to become when you're older, like that internal
Yeah.
struggle against yourself and your hatred of yourself.
I have a dear friend of
Yeah.
mine. I don't think she listens to the podcast, but I have a dear friend of mine who called and left me a voice message on my birthday. And I didn't know it was her because it was from a weird number, and because she'd recently got her number changed or whatever. And towards the end of the message, she asked me, she was like, what would you say to the Sam like that I met, like when we met, if you had the chance to go back and and
Sure.
talk to yourself. And so I've been thinking a lot about that over the past couple of weeks, and I don't know, and it's interesting because like you saying that, describing that relationship, there's a part of me that's like I feel like I feel like maybe I've forgiven uh myself for some of those mistakes, so maybe it would be more pity as opposed to like you know frustration or
Sure.
thinking
Yeah.
that he's just a jackass. I don't know it's fascinating to me, and it's one of the reasons why I love this shit. So I will watch it. I definitely will, and I think that we should
Sure.
we should talk about it, have a little episode where we talk about it. So I'll get on that, and hopefully I'll do my
Cool. Yeah.
homework this week, I promise.
I know it's paradoxical, like, because I know every time you do it, you want to watch it less because that's just how these things work. You know,
Right, I know.
you
The
need
only
to
time
read
I
this
watch
book. You need to watch
the
the
only
show. Yeah.
time I watch Quantum Leap is when we're podcasting. Like I don't really necessarily watch it. Like I don't
Sure.
throw it on for necessarily enjoyment. Like I watch it, because I mean at this point, like my God, I mean some of these episodes I've seen probably close to 20 times.
Yeah.
You
More and
know,
more like for a side, like it's way off, and we probably won't get to it before the new series starts. I almost started to do a tweet thread a couple weeks ago talking about like ranking the Quantum Leap seasons and putting like season 4 at the bottom because we've
mm,
talked about that before.
hmm
Because at least season 5 they were trying something
they
new, and
try.
season
Yeah,
4 just kind of floats. But then as I started thinking about the individual episodes of season 4, I was like, wait, that's not fair. That's not fair. And so now I kind of want to like go give season 4 another chance right
yeah.
now, even though we're a ways out
That's I mean no, that's
from that.
fair. There are
We'll
definitely
see.
times when I want to go. When I want to like throw in like you know MIA and Leap Home Part 1 and Part 2 just to run through all three of them just for the heck of it or whatever.
Oh, sure.
But
Yeah.
I mean, I watched every single episode at least twice when we were first doing it because I'd watch it
Sure.
once just to watch it, then I'd watch it a second time to take notes.
Sure.
So like yeah, they got at least two watches the first, run through that we did. And most of those episodes I'd already seen, at least
Yeah.
twice. Because I think I'd probably seen at least the whole series at least twice by the time we started doing the podcast. And certain episodes I'd seen, literally like 15, 20 times. I mean, I've seen Leap Home Part 1 probably more than 20 times.
God. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, especially
Anyway.
when I was transcribing it back in 1994 when I was, or 95, I think maybe it was 95. Yeah.
Sure.
Lots of
Yep.
pause, rewind, play, on the old VCR.
Yeah.
Oh, kids these days, they don't even know what that's like.
They don't even know. All right. Well, this has been fun. We've gone over as we usually
Yes, we
have.
have. Yeah.
We'll be back next week with Disco Inferno, and we talk about shows
Another
of
good one.
mythology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Season two, I will say this ahead of time. I've already mentioned before, but like looking at the episode list and what we've got coming up, other than the Americanization of Magico, like I mean, we're in the prime of the series. Like
Sure.
there's a run of close to like 10 episodes that are just that rank pretty damn high as far as being just great examples of Quantum Leap.
I'm looking forward to doing Americanization of Machiko again, and all of a sudden you realizing it that it's one of the best episodes of the series.
As Triumph the Insult comic would say, for me to poop on. Uh, anyway.
All right. On that
All
note,
right.
dear listeners, we're going to leap out. Thank you so much for sticking around to us to the end. If you're here, leave us a review, shoot us an email, and we'll see you next week for Disco Inferno.
That's right. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. Stay safe out there and leap responsibly.
Leap responsibly. All right. Take care, y'all. Bye.